All right, so tonight's topic is about intermarriage. The question is, why can't a Jew marry a non-Jew? We're holding towards the end of the series of 70 most difficult questions in Judaism, and this is a real big question. It's very sad for me to be giving this lecture tonight, but unfortunately it's something that we need to contend with in our times. As you know, in the past, Jews needed to contend with the enemy, the non-Jew. They needed to defend Judaism in the face of the non-Jew. There were many disputes amongst rabbis and priests, and many times the Jews were challenged. That was in the past. In the present, unfortunately, we now need to contend with a different kind of a challenge from another Jew. We need to defend our Judaism, our heritage, to Jewish people who are unfortunately ignorant of their tradition. In the past, it was very rare that a Jew even contemplated marrying a non-Jew. Anyone who did basically was prepared to go to shmad. Shmad means to become an apostate, to convert to another religion. That's what it amounted to. And such a step was basically a rejection of Judaism completely. So it was very rare. It was almost not heard of. Today, unfortunately, what is happening is we have a lot of Jews who are ignorant. They're not doing this knowingly, intentionally, rejecting Judaism per se. They simply don't know what it means to be Jewish. They have no clue as to what the problem is with marrying a nice young woman just because she's of a different religion. What has happened in the previous generation and today is also an opening up of society in such a way where the boundaries between Jew and non-Jew have almost disappeared. There's a lot more interaction between Jews and non-Jews in the universities, for example. So because of all that openness, this has contributed as well to that potential of a Jew thinking even, perhaps, of marrying somebody of a different faith. What I'd like to do first is talk to all those parents who may have this problem with one of their children, or to anyone who is actually involved in dating somebody of a different faith, and just to give a brief introduction as to how this should not have happened to begin with. In speaking to the parents who are facing this big dilemma, this big problem of a child of theirs, boy or girl, thinking of marrying out of their faith, what we need to tell them is, in order for this not to have happened, you had to have invested a lot more in your child's Jewish education. And this should go out as a message to all of those out there who do not appreciate, do not value a Jewish education enough. That is what they risk, that one day their young son, young girl, is going to come home with somebody not Jewish. If they are in public school or in college with non-Jews, that possibility unfortunately exists. Therefore, in order to diminish the chances of this ever happening, one needs to invest much more in Jewish education. The stronger the Jewish education is for a child, the less the chances will be that he will even think of going in this direction. Unfortunately, there are parents who are not as pained by this mixed marriage, if it does occur. Some are more pained than others. If a parent is not pained by this, that tells you how far they have been removed from Judaism too. But as I said, this is unfortunately a fact in this country and also in Europe, almost all over the world, that people have become more and more distant from Judaism, and they don't really see anymore the problems that are associated with intermarriage. What do we want to accomplish tonight in 1 hour or so's time? What can we do in 1 hour's time to convince those people who are still thinking about a mixed marriage that it's not such a wise idea? What can we accomplish? There's very little that one could learn al regel achat, as the rabbis tell us, by standing on one foot. It is impossible to give over in 1 hour's time this very serious topic of the problems of an intermarriage. What I'd like to accomplish, however, is at least to anybody who hears this, at least to have them stop for a moment to reconsider, to open up their eyes and to reevaluate their options with a lot more caution. After all, we all agree that any major decision in our life, any major decision requires a good evaluation of the pros and cons, right? Life, after all, is full of mistakes. We make mistakes, but many mistakes it is possible for us to repair. Marriage is one of those areas that if we make a mistake, it may be very difficult to repair, if at all. So therefore, when it comes to making the decision in marriage, you want to be extra careful in evaluating the pros and cons of a particular situation. Now we're also living in a time where marriage in itself has been collapsing. There's a lot of divorces. The rate of divorce in many countries is 50%. 50% of marriages dissolve. So let me just share with you a statistics at the very beginning, that if there are 50% divorces in regular marriages, there's 75% divorces in mixed marriages. Just to let you know that the success rate of a mixed marriage is not very, very high. So, what is the problem of a mixed marriage? Why don't they succeed? What's wrong with it? Why does the Torah tell us that it's prohibited? What's wrong with that? After all, aren't all of us created in the image of God? B'Tselem Elokim, every human being is special, right? So what's wrong with it? Some people will even claim that we're racist, that we are discriminating against certain types of people. But they don't understand what true discrimination is. There's bad discrimination and there's good discrimination. The bad discrimination is when we treat others who are different than us as inferior. We take away their rights. We deprive them of some privilege. We don't give them the job, right? We don't want to have anything to do with them. That's bad discrimination. What's good discrimination? I'm entitled to marry who I want. The one who's closer to me, the one who shares the same ideals as I do, the one who has more of a similar background than I. I'm entitled to certain preferences. Does that mean that I discriminate? We are friends with the Goyim. We do business with the Goyim. We even help a lot of Goyim. We give charity to Goyim. We do a lot for Goyim. But who has to force me to marry them too? I want to marry somebody that is similar to me, that shares the same values as I do, that has similar goals as I do. Is that called discrimination? No. I want to succeed. I want something that's similar to me. That's not called discrimination. Am Yisrael is interested in survival. As a nation, as a people, we have a very important mission that we want to transmit to our children and to our grandchildren, to future generations. And in order to succeed in that mission, we have to marry Jews. Simply stated, that's our goal in marrying another Jew, is we want to survive as a people. We don't want to disappear. We don't therefore want to assimilate. We have this mission, we have this job, and if we are going to succeed in it, it requires that we live our life according to certain standards, and that we marry our own, who will share the same ideals. Okay, comes along a Jew who has not been raised as a Jew. Says, okay, that's very nice for those who believe in this faith. I did not grow up with it. My parents did not teach me anything. They themselves don't observe anything, barely anything Jewish in the home. Why should I have anything to do with this? Why should I care about this? I don't have anything to do with it. What is the answer to him? The answer is very simple. Just because one's parents did not do what they were supposed to does not exonerate the child, the son or the daughter, from being a responsible human being, from doing the right thing. Just because the parents made a mistake does not mean that you are free to do whatever you want. Yes, they may have made a mistake, and it could be their grandparents made a mistake too. But every Jew is a custodian who's responsible to give over this heirloom, this inheritance, this precious inheritance to the future generation. Every Jew has that responsibility, no matter how he grew up. That's just our responsibility as Jews. It happens sometimes that a father or a mother takes a beautiful painting that they inherited from some grandmother and throws it in the attic. They don't care about it, right? That's what the attic is for, storing all kinds of useless things that we can't get rid of them so easily, so we store them in the attic. Let it accumulate dust. All right, comes along the son who has grown up and says, well, it's cleaning up time. I don't want all this junk in the attic. And he sees this painting. He doesn't realize that this is a very precious, valuable painting, Mona Lisa, right? Doesn't realize what he's looking at. Says, let's get rid of it. Does it make sense to get rid of a beautiful painting just like that? Doesn't it make more sense to have it appraised? Maybe this is worth $500,000, and there have been such stories that the guy found something in the attic. He thought it was nothing, and it was a masterpiece. It was priceless. But they didn't know the value of it. You know how many Jews do not know what Judaism is? They don't know what they're about to throw away. They don't know what they're giving up. So before you throw away what your parents threw up in the attic, perhaps have it evaluated. Perhaps have it appraised. And even though we're going to cover some points about Judaism here in this lecture, there's no comparison, there's no alternative than going to a good seminar for a couple days to learn a little bit about what Judaism is. It's such a shame that so many Jews out there in the world are geniuses. They know a lot about everything in the world that you can imagine. Greatest engineers, architects, and scientists. They know a lot about a lot of things except about Judaism. Very sad. Very sad indeed. So therefore, the first and most important step a Jew needs to do, even though he was deprived of any Jewish education and tradition, is take it upon himself to find out, to discover what it is to be a Jew. What is exactly wrong with marrying a non-Jewish woman, or for a Jewish girl marrying a non-Jewish man? Where does it come from? How do we know that it's prohibited? What are the problems? Now, what I want to do is cover a little bit more about what the Kabbalah has to say, because there are a lot of good books that have written about the common sense problems that can exist, issues that can arise, which we'll also talk about briefly. But I want to put a little bit more of an emphasis on what the Kabbalah has to say, because it gives us a deeper understanding about the actual differences between the two. Because I started off saying that we're all the same. We're all created in the image of God. But we're not exactly the same in every respect. So first of all, the prohibition of marrying a non-Jew is an isur that is midivrei Kabbalah. In other words, we received that prohibition from Moshe Rabbeinu when we became a nation. It is not clearly written in the Torah, No, but that pasuk is not a clear prohibition, referring to that prohibition of marrying a non-Jew. The Torah says, "Lo titchaten bam." If that's the verse you're talking about, that is a pasuk that we infer from, that it also includes any non-Jewish person. But that particular pasuk, that particular verse, is not where the Isser comes from, where the prohibition comes from. The prohibition of marrying a non-Jew is midivrei Kabbalah. It has been received by us, by tradition, from Moshe Rabbeinu. And it was from the very, very beginning. We know that as a fact, that it's Asur. But for further elaboration as to exactly what happens when somebody does, I ask you to turn to Sefer Malachi, chapter 2. That's where he describes in detail what the problem is and the consequences of it too. Malachi, chapter 2, pasuk 11. It says, Bagda Yehuda. Yehuda has committed an act of treason, v'to'eva ne'esta b'Yisrael, u'b'Yerushalayim, and an abominable act was committed. What could be so bad to be considered an act of treason, something abominable? Ki hilel Yehuda kodesh Adonai asher ahev. He has desecrated that which is holy to God, who he has loved. Uva'al bat el nechar, and he has become intimate with the daughter of a foreign god. In other words, a non-Jewish woman. The consequences for that act is Yachret Adonai la'isha sheyasena ve'oneh me'ahole Yaakov u'magish mincha l'Adonai Tzevaot. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will cut off from this individual any children who will have any part in the Torah. In other words, one's children from such a relationship, from such a marriage, will not bring about children who are devoted to Torah. That will not bring out children who are Talmidei Chachamim. Right. 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 We've had this problem from time to time. And the consequence, of course, for this individual, besides the kids losing out a lot, is that this man is, in essence, divorcing himself from his people as well. And at some point in time, his entire lineage, that entire family, will disappear completely from the Jewish nation. But the immediate effect is, of course, the effect on his children. Children that will have nothing to do with Torah, children that will totally not be associated with Torah learning, which is also a big loss. So the question still is, why? Why is it so? What did he do wrong? There's a lot of nice non-Jewish people out there who have good character, good-natured people that can make an excellent spouse. But the Kabbalah explains as follows. In the same way that the physical body consists of various elements, 4 elements, earth, water, fire, and air, right? The physical body consists of certain elements. So does the neshama, the soul. We are all endowed with the soul. The soul is something spiritual. And the spiritual soul also has various markivim, various elements of which it is consists of. The essence of which, the essence of that soul, is that it is a chelek eloka mimal, that it's something divine. In the world of neshamot, the Kabbalah speaks of 2 otzarot of neshamot, 2 storage houses of souls. One is of a soul that is more divine than the other. And because of the extra divinity that it has, it is more attracted to that which is spiritual. It therefore has an easier time fulfilling God's commandments. It is more of a spiritual soul. There is another kind of soul which is not as spiritual, and therefore is much more selfish, much more self-centered, and therefore more materialistic in its nature. Ever since the Jewish people received the Torah in Har Sinai, all of our souls come from this otzar, from this storage house that is more spiritual. And the idea behind giving us a soul from that storage house is in order to enable us to succeed in the performance of the mitzvot, of the commandments. In order for the Jew to be able to continuously perform the mitzvot, even in the most challenging times, it would have to be that his soul is attracted to doing that which is more spiritual. And therefore, all the neshamot that the Jews have from that point in time are from that storage house. The rest of the world, their souls comes from the other storage house. Not as spiritual. And because of that, it is not possible to join two souls that are very, very different. Why not? Well, how do we join two souls? In marriage. Marriage is a very, very powerful bond. It is a bond of souls. It's not just a bond between two bodies. It is supposed to be a spiritual bond. It's supposed to be a union between two individuals that also have common goals. In the case of the Jew, spiritual goals, a spiritual mission. Besides having good chemistry, which is very important too, between two individuals, the two have to have similar goals, similar outlook about life. If any of those three is missing, it's not going to be a successful relationship. If the goals are not the same, they don't look at life the same, they don't want the same things, the closer they are on the level of the soul, the better the chances are that they will want the exact same things. In order to accomplish that, to bring about two souls that want similar things that are good for each other, that can succeed with each other, our tradition teaches that Hashem is the one that is mezaveg zivugim. He is the one that puts two people together. He is the one that knows who goes with whom. And that is why Judaism stresses the point of soulmates. Soulmates means two souls that belong with each other. They start out as one soul in the upper world, half of it being male, the other half being female. They come down to this world as separate entities, and the matchmaker, the real matchmaker, God, is the one that brings them together. So therefore, what do we know so far? That a non-Jewish woman, non-Jewish man, can never, never, never be the soulmate, the true soulmate of a Jew. It's completely from a different storage house. It's therefore not going to be the optimal combination that will produce the desired results. And what is the desired result of the union between husband and wife? Not just procreation or having children, but to do the will of a God, to do the will of Hashem. Even two Jews who get married to each other do not always succeed. That's true too. But their chances are much better because they are endowed with the neshama that is more spiritual and more capable of not necessarily thinking of themselves, but thinking about what Hashem wants of us. It is more spiritual. Now you can understand and appreciate how our forefathers had the ability to give their lives for that which they loved and believed in. How could somebody just give their life for what they believe? Where do they take that courage and strength from? That's the neshama that they have, that is endowed with that ability and that willingness to do, first and foremost, the most important thing, the will of Hashem, much more than what they want in their life. The average human being who does not have that quality in his soul, that divinity, could never be as devoted to a cause more than to his own personal needs. A greater cause in himself to give his life for that. And I'm not talking about suicide. People who commit suicide because they do so to kill someone. And that's completely different. I'm talking about to do the will of God, whatever it takes, to give your life for that, for what you believe in. That requires a tremendous amount of selflessness. Selflessness is such a beautiful midah. It's a spiritual midah, spiritual characteristic. It's not something that comes from the physical body. It's something that comes from the neshama. So therefore, one of the problems that we see immediately is that the two are very, very different at the level of the soul. One would hopefully be willing to do the will of Hashem. That will be his highest priority. One will not have that much of an interest to do the will of God. Besides the fact that they're not going to necessarily have common goals and common values, both of them are going to be thinking of different things, which is already a recipe for disaster. Love in Judaism, therefore, is what? Love is spiritual. It is not just the bonding of two people physically. It is something spiritual in nature which involves the act of giving. It involves looking at the virtues of another individual. And it involves commitment. This is what we translate as love. One more time. Love is something spiritual, not infatuation or something physical. True love is the act of giving to the other. It is the ability for us to focus on the virtues of another individual and to like those virtues. And it's, of course, it requires a great amount of commitment to the other, even though sometimes life has many challenges. Let's say the husband or wife becomes very, very sick and disabled. A true spiritual love says, I'm going to take care of them and not send them off to his parents. And this has happened, that a couple got married and they were in love, very much in love. The guy was in a car accident, became incapacitated, paralyzed, and she told him, no, why don't you just go back to your parents? They got divorced. That's love. That's love. She sent him back, got divorced. That's it. You're no more. You're no good. You're not good for me anymore. True love, therefore, involves a lot more caring. It's a lot. I mean, there are people, of course, who are not Jewish, who have something called altruism. They have an altruistic love for each other. Yes, that exists too, but it's not very common. People tend to be more selfish. So their love is not necessarily a pure love. A real pure love is an act of giving to another person, which is therefore something spiritual in nature, not physical. Therefore, any marriage with a non-Jew can never attain this kind of a dimension where the depth of this love is so spiritual. One of the most famous excuses that people like to give when there is some mismatch between the two, we observe a mismatch between the man and the woman, whether they're Jewish or not. One of the mistakes people tend to make is they say, love conquers all. Have you heard that? Love conquers all. Now, there's a lot of problems with this. First of all, it's not true, and I'm going to demonstrate to you how it's not true. But second of all, remember, they're not talking about their real love to begin with. So they're in for a big surprise. First of all, you should know that any love which is not pure, not spiritual, will eventually dissipate. It eventually goes away. It doesn't last forever. That's how you know it was never a true love. But when somebody says love conquers all, he doesn't really mean it. And I'll prove it to you. It's a big mistake. Let's say somebody is in love with a non-Jewish girl. Okay? He really loves her. Ask this man, would he still marry her if she tells him she wants to move to Alaska to study penguins? And he, of course, has a good job in Southern California. And he wouldn't want to move to such a cold place just because she wants to study about penguins. But you said love conquers all. Why don't you do it? You love her. Doesn't love conquer all? Well, not exactly all. Okay. You said love conquers all. Then why are you asking her to convert to be a Jew? Why don't you convert and be a Catholic like her? Oh no, she has to convert for me to marry her. We're talking about a guy who actually wants to convert somebody. He doesn't want to just marry somebody not Jewish. Are you willing to convert to her religion? No. But love conquers all. Would you let her have a big cross in the living room? Love conquers all. Right? No, but love conquers all. Right? Love does not conquer all. There are certain limits that we have that we would not allow for, we would not tolerate. And by the way, the fact that you are asking her to convert to your religion, isn't she in contempt of her faith by doing that? You're asking her to rebel against her parents? You're asking her to rebel against her faith just to marry you? I mean, if somebody, by the way, is willing to convert, let go of their faith, maybe one of these days they'll let go of you too. Anybody who's willing to give up something that was precious to them, maybe they'll give up the man they love too. I mean, what's the difference? They're capable of giving this up. They may be willing to give you up too. There's a lot of, therefore, hypocrisy in this kind of thinking that love will conquer all, especially if we're not talking about the real love. True love that conquers all, you know what it is? It is a love that we're willing to overlook the faults of an individual. There's a saying that a true friend is a friend that knows you with all your faults, weaknesses, and still loves you. That, yes, that's true love. True love is the willingness to overlook another person's faults. But don't ever say love conquers all. There's no such thing. On the contrary, this kind of love that people think conquers all is a blinding kind of love. It misleads you. It doesn't allow you to focus properly. It's not real love. And because people get married with this not true love, their homes eventually fall apart. They can't last long. They're not built on a healthy foundation. Okay, so we have two people, nevertheless, who are very, very much in love. What do we do now to separate them? It's a very difficult task, because even though I just finished saying love does not really conquer all, it's still something very formidable. It's still something very powerful. If somebody's in love with a girl, there's very little that can do to separate them. Very little that we can do. And the chances of success are very small. Unless the love for his faith, for his Torah, for his Judaism, will be stronger. Only then you may be able to convince him or her to let go of this particular relationship. Otherwise, love is very powerful and very difficult to undo. Even if it's on a very, very shaky foundation. They don't know that yet. They don't think so. The only way one can convince them, therefore, is if their love for their heritage, for their faith, is much stronger. And unfortunately, many times it's not so strong. It's not strong enough. And that is why they just continue with their intermarriage. Getting back to what we were saying before, the Torah was very concerned about a Jew's relationship with that which is unholy, that which will take him away from his divine mission to do the will of Hashem. And because of that, the Torah prescribed for us certain mitzvot, certain commandments. And what all these commandments have in common is to strengthen our kesher, our bond with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so that we should always stay in touch with Him, so that we should always stay on the right track. That is the purpose of all the mitzvot. Some of these mitzvot are to maintain our distance from anything which is unholy and impure. For example, ma'achalot asurot, forbidden foods. For a non-Jew, it's okay. For a Jew, it's not okay to eat certain forbidden foods. What all these forbidden foods or forbidden relationships have in common is that there's a certain level of tumah, of impurity in them. And tumah is the greatest obstacle in a Jew's performance as a Jew. It's an obstacle because it drives him away from being focused on what he's supposed to, and that is the will of Hashem. These are forces that exist out there. That is exactly what they do. They are unholy, and therefore they attack that which is holy. They don't get along, these two forces. So a Jew, for his own health, for his own benefit, is told to stay away from these things at all cost. Now, what happens if he did become unclean by touching, for example, something unclean? There are ways to become clean again, to become pure. It may involve immersion in a ritual bath, depending on the level of tumah. But however, one of the highest forms of impurity, which is very difficult to get rid of, is the bonding or the marriage between a Jew and a non-Jew. Because that tumah, if a Jew should ever fall into that, is very difficult to separate himself from. The Kabbalah considers it a trap. One who lives with a non-Jewish woman, and especially if he gets married to her, the bond between those two is so strong, the tum'ah, in a way, imprisons that individual and makes it very difficult for him to let go. One who therefore has a non-Jewish girlfriend, is very much involved with a non-Jewish woman, it will be very difficult for him to let go just because of the severity, because of the strength of that tum'ah in keeping him in a prison, in a sense. Very, very difficult to get out of it. Now, there are Jews, of course, who do not even realize that they are in prison. They're so distant, they're so ignorant, they don't even know that they fell in the trap. Eventually, when it falls apart, when the marriage falls apart, when they don't get along, they really, really are in shock. There was a guy who actually had to be hospitalized in an asylum. He went crazy. You know, he couldn't believe that this woman that he loved so much would turn against him and call him a dirty Jew. After many years of having kids together, one day she called him that. It was in her blood. You know, of course. And he, of course, got divorced, lost all his money because he had to pay alimony for the kids, and ended up in an asylum. He went crazy. How could this happen? You know? This tumah is very powerful. A non-Jew has no problem with eating forbidden foods for us because his source, the neshama that he has, is from that side, from the sitra hara, from that side. It can tolerate it. When a Jew lives this world, he becomes tameh. The body, the corpse is unclean, it's impure. Because there was a neshama there before. And once a neshama is removed, the unclean or impure forces try to invade that empty vessel and get any nourishment that they can from the holy sparks that were there before. That's why a Jew becomes tameh, unclean, when he dies. A non-Jew does not have that tum'ah as much upon his death because he always belonged to that side. So the death of that individual does not make a big difference as far as the impure forces taking over that empty vessel now, that corpse, that cadaver. With a Jew, it makes a big difference because of what he was before when the neshama was in him, the holy neshama, and now that it's no longer there. Now, in the same way that the health of a human being, the health of a physical body is determined by how a person feels, his weaknesses, his illnesses, we can tell if he's sick. We can tell if a person is unclean, impure, by how distant he is from Judaism. Because as I said earlier, the tum'ah has a tremendous power in moving a Jew away from his source, from where he should be. And if one is very, very distant, if one is completely detached from any Jewish tradition, it could be because he has been associating himself with all of these impure forces. So that in itself is an indication. You can tell what he's been doing, where he has been, by seeing the spiritual level of that individual. If it's a very low spiritual level, if most of the day what he's thinking is about personal desires and not spiritual desires or spiritual interests, then he has been unfortunately taken over by the tumah. I'm not talking about necessarily a Jew who is not observant. There are even observant Jews, Jews who observe Torah mitzvot, who have become very distant because of their immersion or their exposure to all this tumah. And of course, and they are the ones who make many mistakes in life, whether it's a mistake in their relationship at home, whether it's a mistake in business, in cheating people, in acting in a dishonest way. This all has to do with the impure forces out there. We're talking about an individual who has a holy neshama, of course, but can be distracted, can be misled, can be taken away from that which is holy and that which is spiritual, and be interested only in doing what his heart desires instead of what Hashem wants of him. That, unfortunately, is a problem for many people, regardless of how Jewish they are or not. It makes no difference. But I'm mentioning this to you because it is a form of barometer that you can tell the spiritual level of an individual as to where his interests lie, what he most desires in life. People, however, who get married, as we said earlier, if they marry those that are not Jewish, they are much more in a prison than those who have not gotten married. And it becomes even a more serious problem if they have children together. Because when a Jew has a child from a non-Jewish woman, you know that that child is not Jewish, right? The reason why that child is not Jewish is because the woman is the kli havladot. She's the vessel that carries all the kids. And because she's the vessel that carries the kids, the fetus, the neshama that will enter that womb of that mother will come from which treasure house, from which storage house? From the other one, from the impure one, not from the Jewish one, not from the pure one. Because the mother is not Jewish, she's the one that's going to carry the fetus. The neshama is going to enter the fetus, right? Which neshama is going to want to enter a non-Jewish woman? Not the one from the Jewish source, not from the Jewish storage house, from the divine storage house, from the other one. So that child is going to be not Jewish. It's not going to have a Jewish neshama, not a Jewish soul. And by this Jewish man producing a non-Jewish child, he is giving more power to the non-Jewish side. What's wrong with that? Well, the Jew's job has always been to strengthen the holy side, to strengthen holiness in the world, to bring about Hashem's rule into this world, to strengthen that which is holy by him engaging in something which is unholy, producing a child that's unholy. He is giving strength to that other side, which is really competing with holiness. Oh, that's an act of treason. That's an act of treason when you give the enemy ammunition, when you give the enemy strength. That's why it's called Bagda Yehuda. He has committed an act of treason because he has given power to the other side, to the opposing side. That which is not compatible with Judaism. This is besides the damage that he does to himself. This is besides the damage that he does to his children. This is damage being done to the Jewish people. And according to the Gemara says that Mashiach does not come until all the souls that have to come into this world have come down. Comes along this man and sends a soul into a non-Jewish baby. He's also therefore responsible for delaying the coming of Mashiach. Another problem that he's causing. This association, this union with the other side, as it is called in the Kabbalah, causes a tremendous amount of harm all around. Okay, what about conversion? Let's say the Jew says, I'm going to convert her. What now? She's not going to be not Jewish, she's going to be a Jew. Is that okay? There have been many good converts. According to our tradition, a real convert, a ger tzedek, is a nefesh shene'eshka me'asitra achara. It's one of those souls that was robbed or taken away from that storage house and brought into the other storage house, into the divine one. And that is why she is more divine, wants to be Jewish. Now, there are various reasons why a true convert wants to be Jewish, but basically they have something in them that makes them be attracted to that which is more divine. That is why they really want this. But that's only when she's interested in Judaism because of what Judaism is, not because of him. Not that she wants to be Jewish because she wants to marry him. she really, or he really wants to be a Jew because he loves Judaism. He's attracted to it. Then it's acceptable. As long as the man is not a Kohen is not allowed to marry a convert, it's workable, it's possible. We have Ruth HaMoaviyah. We have many good converts in Judaism. The problem begins when it's not for real. When it's not conversion for Judaism, but it's conversion for him. That causes problems down the road. Because if it's not pure, for the sake of accepting the yoke of heaven, and for the willingness, the sincere willingness to perform Torah mitzvot, down the road there's always a chance, big chance, that she or he may let go of their Jewishness, and they may go back to their old ways, and the kids that grow up in this kind of a home become very confused. There's a Christmas tree, and there's a Chanukiah, there's non-Jewish symbols and Jewish symbols, and what next? Right? So it becomes very, very complex, very confusing for the kids, and it eventually falls apart too, because the husband, if he's Jewish, even a little bit Jewish, will not tolerate that kind of atmosphere. Now, I know that there are some Jews who are very tolerant. They've become so distant from Judaism that they don't care to have Christmas trees. I mean, that's a tragedy. That's very, very sad. And, you know, they're even in worse shape because they don't even realize how terrible this is. You know, but I'm talking about the average individual who at least knows a little bit of what it means to be Jewish, that there are some limits to what he's willing to do or not do. So something like this, where the convert was not serious, was not sincere from the very beginning, it eventually will fall apart. And if it falls apart, it will produce many, many problems in the future. These are things that are hard to anticipate, unless, of course, you realize from the very beginning that if something is not sincere, it's on shaky ground. But people don't think so. People like to paint a rosy picture. Everything will be okay. She'll do anything for me. No, she won't. There's no such thing. There's no such a guarantee. People will go back to their old ways very easily. Judaism, therefore, does not want to be a missionary kind of faith. We don't want converts. And the reason why we don't want converts is because we don't want individuals who will give us trouble, who will bring with themselves negative influences. We do accept and we do embrace those who are sincere. That, yes, because they have similar goals that we do. So they're going to be helpful in some ways. They're going to be at least okay. We're not interested in those who will cause us trouble. And therefore, as a rule, we don't want converts. And anybody thinking that this will solve his problem is making a big mistake, because if she's doing it because of the marriage, the chances are that this may never work. By the way, anyone who does not, in the very beginning, demonstrate sincere willingness to be Jewish for the performance of the mitzvot, their conversion is not valid. Even if it was signed by Orthodox rabbis, if we can figure out for sure that it was never meant to accept Torah and mitzvot, the conversion is not valid. The kids are not Jewish. And there have been people who came to enroll their kids in a Jewish school, and the principal told them, I'm sorry, your kid is not Jewish. What do you mean it's not Jewish? My wife was converted. Well, what kind of conversion was it? Who did the conversion? A Reform rabbi? Forget it. They never told me that. They never told me it had to be an Orthodox conversion. Well, if you would have gotten the Orthodox rabbi, they would not have converted her to begin with anyway. Because imagine her becoming more religious than you. And there's a story. I don't know if it's true, but it's a very cute story. There was a man who wanted to marry a non-Jewish girl, and he said, well, and he was not so observant, but she had to go learn to be a Jew. So she took classes, and she became very, very frum. And after she became very frum, she told the young man that she was dating, I don't want to date you anymore. I don't want to date a man who's willing to marry a non-Jewish girl. Yeah. She became stronger than him. So, anyway, it doesn't work out. It's very, very shaky. If the reason is that she's converting is because of the marriage. What's so special about a Jewish home? A Jewish home, in order for it to succeed, has to be a Mishkan Hashem. Mishkan Hashem, I guess we can translate the sanctuary of God. It's a place where the husband and wife will give to each other, where they will perform certain mitzvot, where they will raise children in the ways of Hashem, in the ways of the Torah. In order to accomplish this, in order to do a good job at this, they need a guide. The guide is the Torah. Even observant people need this guide. Without this guide, the chances are that there are going to be many problems, many misunderstandings, many issues that will easily contribute to the collapse of this marriage. Very easily. A Jew needs the Torah as a guide. Without it, he cannot survive spiritually or physically. One therefore contemplates marrying a non-Jewish woman, even if he's not observant, even if he doesn't have such a strong Jewish background, he doesn't have the Torah as a guide, obviously. His chances of success are not as strong. He doesn't have that advantage of being guided. He has a disadvantage of marrying somebody who doesn't believe exactly what he believes. She's of a different soul, a different makeup. There's a chance she may go back to her old ways. There's a chance that this love will dissipate because this whole marriage is not based on a very solid foundation. A foundation of spiritual love, of wanting to do what the will of Hashem is much more than what we want for ourselves. Just the whole idea of a Jewish home is so very different than a non-Jewish home that just because of that alone, the chances are that it's going to fall apart. Remember, we're living in a very materialistic society today, and because of that, a lot of things go wrong just because of that. Materialism, a lack of money, too much money, just problems with money. If the home is not a spiritual home that's founded on Jewish values, there's going to be problems. And when the people are so different, very, very far apart from different backgrounds, it makes things even more difficult. All right, so we've come to the last point now. What do we do if, nevertheless, a couple is getting married? As parents or as friends, how do we stop it? Nevertheless, they heard all of this talk. They know that there's problems with this mixed marriage business. Is there anything we can still do to stop them? Very difficult. They're in love, remember? Very difficult to stop somebody who's in love. Different rabbis have different strategies. And I'm just going to share with you a story of one rabbi whose strategies seem to work sometimes. He would take the Jew, the young man who was thinking of marrying a non-Jewish girl. He would take him late at night to shul when everybody is gone. The place is empty. It's dark. He would bring him close to the Hechal. He would ask him to take out a Sefer Torah. And as this young man was holding the Sefer Torah, the rabbi would tell him, now go ahead and throw it on the floor, step on it, and spit on it. He says, Rabbi, you really mean it? He says, well, that's exactly what you're about to do by marrying a non-Jewish girl. And this would shock him so much that he would think about it. But that's exactly what a Jew is doing. He's basically throwing down the Sefer Torah that was so holy and so treasured to our forefathers, all these generations. And he's basically casting it off, spitting on it, stepping on it. And if a Jew begins to think a little bit about it, maybe that shock will enable him to break off the relationship. Breaking off a relationship is very, very difficult. It is. It's very emotional. It's very delicate. What are you going to say? What are you going to tell her? No. There are ways to deal with it. If anybody has that issue, it can be dealt with. I agree and I admit it's hard to break up a relationship. Somebody that you cared for so much, but you've come to terms with reality. There's a good way to do it. But it's very difficult to convince anybody who's in love. But sometimes you have to impress upon them how serious of an offense, of a transgression, of a break with one's people, this will be, this act of intermarriage. Parents, besides impressing impressing on their children how serious this act is, they have to tell their child, black and white, we're not going to go to your wedding. You have to be very, very clear that you're opposed to it. You have to be very, very strong that you're not going to support it. Otherwise, your chances of success are decreased. You have to be strong. You have to be very, very strong, but always leave the door open. Never do as some people have done. We disown you. No, that you don't want to do. People are ignorant. People don't realize what they're doing these days. It's not like in the past where people were more aware and for whatever personal reason they decided to break with their religion. Today, the majority of Jews who intermarry do not really realize, do not know what they're doing. So always leave the door open. If a son or daughter wants to come back home, allow them to. But you have to stand firm in how terrible this is, how you're opposed to it, how they're going to break your heart if they do this. You're not going to go to the wedding. You cannot go to such a wedding. You cannot go to your friend's wedding if this is what he's doing. You cannot show any support for any mixed marriages whatsoever. Even if it's a rabbi, not a priest, who's performing the wedding. Even if it's in a shul and not in the church. You're not even allowed to go into a church. You cannot in any way whatsoever show that you agree with this. If nevertheless they still go ahead with it, remind them on their day of the chuppah that there will be many, many tears that will be shed by the forefathers, many tears that will be shed in heaven for this individual who's breaking away, divorcing his people, because that's what he's doing. What I would like to tell you now is in case you know anybody who has this problem, I advise you to read a very good book, an excellent book on this topic called How to Prevent an Intermarriage, a book that was written by Rabbi Pakuz. Yeah, there are various books. There are various books on this topic, but this one, I just gave you, is a very, very thorough book on this topic with a lot of advice, how to handle the situation, advice for the parents, advice for the rabbi, advice for the couple that's considering going ahead with this. One of the best books that I've seen on the topic. Perhaps after reading this book and hearing lectures about this, maybe then that will open up their eyes in realizing that they're doing something wrong. What I'd like to finish with is this very important point to all of those who have thought about going ahead with this step anyway. Look around right now what has happened to the economy. Do you know how many people have been blinded by the promise of a high interest rate and have lost millions of dollars in their investment, right? What did we see? People were blinded, and they have been blinded in the past, and they will be blinded in the future by money. Money can be blinding too. Promises of high returns, which are unfounded. Nevertheless, money is blinding. People have been blinded and have lost millions of dollars. I therefore recommend anybody who's thinking about an intermarriage to look very, very closely at this fake love that he calls love. This love that is also blinding. This love that can mislead him to lose much more than millions of dollars, lose his life. To think twice about what he's about to do. And instead, he should open up his eyes and learn about Judaism. Because when a Jew begins to learn about Judaism, he will discover the world that he never knew existed. And he will begin, B'ezrat Hashem, to see things completely differently. He will see a world that is spiritual, and he will begin, B'ezrat Hashem, to identify with a world that is his own. Amen.